The fluorescent lights above Kelvin flickered, casting an uneven glow over the cramped dorm room. He sat hunched over his desk, staring at the stack of bills that seemed to grow taller with each passing day. His stomach rumbled, a reminder he hadn't eaten since breakfast, which had been nothing more than a stale piece of bread salvaged from the university cafeteria's trash bins. Kelvin sighed and rubbed his temples, trying to focus on the economics textbook open in front of him. But the words blurred together, their meaning lost amidst the weight of his financial struggles. How was he supposed to concentrate when hunger gnawed at him like a relentless predator? When rent was due in 3 days and he still owed half of last month's payment. He glanced down at his threadbare sweater, its once vibrant blue now faded to a dull gray. The sleeves were frayed at the cuffs, and there was a small tear near the collar that he tried to mend with duct tape. It wasn't much, but it kept him warm during the chilly nights, and that was all that mattered. Outside, the rain pattered against the window pane, adding to the dreary atmosphere inside. Kelvin leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment. If only life could be simpler. If only he didn't have to juggle 2 part-time jobs just to scrape by. If only he weren't constantly overshadowed by the wealthier students who strolled around campus in designer clothes, laughing carelessly as if money grew on trees. A sudden knock at the door startled him out of his thoughts. "Come in," he called, hoping it wasn't another bill collector or landlord threatening eviction. To his surprise, it was Marcus, one of his closest friends from class. Marcus carried himself with an easy confidence, always dressed impeccably in tailored shirts and leather shoes. Unlike Kelvin, Marcus came from money, a fact he rarely flaunted but never denied either. "Hey, man," Marcus said, stepping into the room. "Mind if I crash here for a bit? The library's packed." "Sure, go ahead," Kelvin replied, gesturing toward the single chair in the corner. As Marcus settled in, Kelvin noticed a flyer sticking out of his backpack. Curious, he reached over and pulled it free. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. The design was minimalist, featuring a black and white image of a crescent moon surrounded by intricate symbols. At the bottom, bold letters read, "Seekers of Power, Unlock Your Destiny." "What's this?" Kelvin asked, holding up the flyer. Marcus shrugged casually. "Oh, that. Some people handed them out after my seminar yesterday. They are some kind of group, I guess. Secretive, though. No one really knows what they do. A secret society." Kelvin raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. "Sounds sketchy." "Yeah, probably," Marcus admitted. "But you know how these things go, half the time, it's just bored rich kids pretending to be mysterious. Still, they did say something about helping people achieve their goals. Maybe worth looking into." Kelvin frowned, turning the flyer over in his hands. Achieving goals sounded tempting, but at what cost? He shoved the thought aside and handed the flyer back to Marcus. "No, not interested. I've got enough trouble without getting mixed up in weird cults." Marcus chuckled. "Fair point. Just don't blame me when your life stays exactly the same." Kelvin forced a laugh, but the comment lingered in his mind long after Marcus left. Did his life have to stay the same? Was there any way to break free from the cycle of poverty and struggle? Later that evening, Kelvin found himself wandering aimlessly through the student union building, too restless to sleep. The cafeteria was closed, so he settled for a cup of water from the fountain and wandered into the lounge area. That's where he spotted her again, the girl from earlier, sitting alone in the corner, flipping through a worn leather-bound book. She looked up as he approached, her dark eyes locking onto his. "You seem curious," she said softly, gesturing to the flyer clutched in his hand. "Why don't you come closer?" Kelvin hesitated but eventually took a seat across from her. "I'm Kelvin," he introduced himself. "And you are?" My name isn't important, she replied cryptically. What matters is whether you're ready to change your life forever. Her words sent a shiver down his spine. Change my life? What do you mean? The woman smiled faintly, leaning forward slightly. We all want something, don't we? Success, happiness, freedom from our burdens. But sometimes, the path to those things isn't clear or safe. My organization offers guidance. We can help you attain whatever you desire. And what's the catch? Kelvin asked wearily. Her smile faltered, replaced by a solemn expression. Everything comes at a price, Kelvin. Are you willing to pay it? Before he could respond, she stood abruptly, gathering her belongings. Think carefully. And remember, opportunity doesn't wait for second chances. With that, she disappeared into the shadows, leaving Kelvin alone with the flyer clenched tightly in his fist. Back in his dorm, Kelvin lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The conversation replayed in his mind like a broken record. Opportunity doesn't wait for second chances. What did she mean by that? And why did her offer feel both irresistible and terrifying at the same time? His thoughts drifted to Sophia, his girlfriend of 2 years. She was everything good in his life, kind, supportive, and unconditionally loving. Whenever things got tough, she reminded him of his worth, encouraging him to keep pushing forward. But even her unwavering faith couldn't erase the gnawing dissatisfaction within him. Sophia deserved better than this, to live in a dingy dorm, eat cheap ramen noodles, and worry about whether her boyfriend would make ends meet next month. Didn't she deserve a partner who could provide for her, someone who wouldn't drag her down with his problems? The idea of joining the mysterious group tempted him more with every passing minute. If they truly held the key to wealth and success, why shouldn't he take advantage of it? Surely, there were others who'd done the same and thrived. Yet deep down, a voice whispered warnings. This wasn't normal. There was no such thing as instant riches without consequences. Still, the allure remained strong, pulling at him like a magnet. As dawn broke through the cracks in the blinds, Kelvin made his decision. He would attend the meeting advertised on the flyer, not because he believed in magic or mysticism, but because he needed answers. And if those answers led to a better future, then maybe, just maybe, the risk would be worth it. Little did he know, this choice marked the beginning of a journey far darker and more perilous than anything he could have imagined. Sophia was humming softly as she arranged a small bouquet of wildflowers on Kelvin's desk. The petals were slightly wilted, but their vibrant colors still managed to brighten the otherwise drab dorm room. She glanced around, taking in the familiar chaos, stacks of textbooks, crumpled papers, and a half-empty coffee mug sitting beside his laptop. You really know how to make this place feel like home, she teased, turning toward him with a warm smile. Kelvin looked up from his notes, momentarily distracted by her presence. For a second, he forgot about the looming deadlines and financial worries that plagued him daily. Thanks, he said, forcing a grin. But honestly, it's you who makes it bearable. Sophia crossed the room and sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. You've been working so hard lately. I wish I could do more to help. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. You already do. Just being here means everything to me. They stayed like that for a while, basking in the quiet comfort of each other's company. It wasn't often they had moments like these, moments free from stress or obligation. Sophia spoke first, breaking the silence. I've been thinking, she began, her voice soft but filled with excitement. After graduation, we should travel together. Maybe Europe. Or even Asia. There's so much of the world we haven't seen yet. Kelvin chuckled, though the sound lacked its usual warmth. Sounds amazing. But you know how expensive trips like that are. She waved off his concern. Don't worry about money right now. We'll figure it out. Together. Her confidence always amazed him. No matter how dire things seemed, Sophia never lost faith in them as a couple. And yet, as much as he wanted to share her optimism, doubt crept into his mind. How could they dream big when reality kept pulling them down? The days leading up to Valentine's Day passed in a blur of mixed emotions for Kelvin. On one hand, he cherished the thought of surprising Sophia with something special, a gesture worthy of her love and devotion. On the other hand, the instructions from the court loomed large, gnawing at his conscience. Their leader, a man known only as Ezekiel, had been clear during their clandestine meeting. To unlock true worth, you must offer a sacrifice of pure love. Someone who adores you unconditionally. Only then will the pact be sealed. At first, the words had felt hollow, almost absurd. But as Ezekiel explained further, the precise steps, the incantations, the promise of instant riches, Kelvin found himself nodding along, desperate to believe it could work. Desperate enough to consider betraying the person he loved most. Now, standing in front of his mirror, he adjusted the tie Ezekiel had given him. Black silk, perfectly knotted, designed specifically for the ritual. He stared at his reflection, searching for answers in his own eyes. What had happened to the boy who once dreamed of building a life with Sophia through honest effort and mutual support? The knock on his door startled him back to reality. It was time. When he opened the door, Sophia stood there, dressed in a flowing red dress that made her look radiant. Her cheeks flushed pink under his gaze. "You look incredible," she whispered, stepping inside. "So do you," he replied, managing a smile. "I hope you're ready for a night you won't forget." She tilted her head, curiosity sparking in her eyes. "A surprise? You've been planning this all week, haven't you?" He laughed nervously, avoiding her probing stare. "Let's just say it's going to be unforgettable." As they walked to the secluded park Ezekiel had specified, Sophia chattered happily about her plans for the evening. She mentioned a new recipe she'd tried earlier, how excited she was to spend quality time with him, and how much she loved surprises. Each word cut deeper into Kelvin's resolve, making the weight of his betrayal heavier with every step. "Are you okay?" she asked suddenly, stopping mid-stride. "You seem distant." "It's nothing," he assured her, forcing another smile. "Just nervous about tonight, I guess." She placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Relax. Whatever it is, I'm sure it will be perfect. You always go above and beyond for me." Her trust nearly undid him. How could he hurt someone who believed in him so completely? Yet, the pull of the promised wealth remained strong, whispering promises of a better future for both of them. Once they reached the designated clearing, Kelvin set up the items Ezekiel had provided, candles, herbs, and a strange dagger etched with symbols he couldn't decipher. Sophia watched curiously, her expression shifting from excitement to confusion. "What is all this?" she asked, her tone laced with unease. "A little tradition," he lied, lighting the candles. "Something meaningful, just for us." Her brow furrowed, but before she could press further, he began the incantation. The air grew heavy, charged with an energy neither of them could ignore. Sophia took a hesitant step backward, her face pale. "Kelvin, what are you doing?" she demanded, panic rising in her voice. Too late, he realized the full extent of his mistake. Too late to turn back. "I'm sorry," he murmured, tears stinging his eyes. "This is for us. For our future." But as the ritual unfolded, Sophia screamed, not in anger, but in agony, and Kelvin knew he'd sacrificed far more than just her love. He'd shattered the very foundation of everything they shared. Kelvin awoke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. The room around him was dark, save for the faint glow of moonlight streaming through the expansive windows of his newly acquired penthouse apartment. He clutched at his chest, heart pounding as if it might burst from his ribcage. The nightmare lingered, vivid and unrelenting. In his dream, Sophia had been there, her voice echoing in his ears, a haunting whisper that reverberated through every corner of his mind. Her cries seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, surrounding him, suffocating him. The chill in the air felt unnatural, seeping into his bones like ice water. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes that mimicked her form. Her face loomed closer, eyes wide with betrayal, mouth open in silent screams. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the vision dissolved, leaving behind only the oppressive weight of guilt pressing down on him like an invisible hand. He sat up slowly, trying to shake off the lingering effects of the nightmare. But no matter how hard he tried, the memory of Sophia's voice wouldn't fade. It haunted him even in waking hours, creeping into his thoughts when he least expected it. Kelvin looked around the opulent living space, attempting to distract himself. Everything about this apartment screamed success: marble floors, designer furniture, crystal chandeliers, but none of it brought him peace. Instead, the luxury felt hollow, almost suffocating. The pristine white walls seemed to close in on him, the gleaming surfaces reflecting back his own guilt-ridden expression whenever he passed a mirror. What good was wealth if it came at such a terrible cost? Despite the emptiness gnawing at him, life outside the confines of his apartment appeared perfect. He now drove a sleek black sports car, wore tailored suits that drew admiring glances wherever he went, and mingled effortlessly with the elite university crowd he'd always envied. His classmates who once ignored him now sought his company, eager to bask in the reflected glow of his newfound status. Invitations poured in daily, exclusive parties, high-end dinners, charity galas, all events designed to showcase wealth and power. But beneath the surface, chaos brewed. His sleep grew increasingly fragmented, punctuated by nightmares so vivid they left him exhausted during the day. During daylight hours, he found himself snapping at people for no reason, unable to focus on conversations or tasks. Even mundane activities like signing checks or choosing outfits became Herculean efforts, overshadowed by the constant nagging sense of unease. One evening, as he stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, Kelvin noticed something strange. A figure moved below, darting between alleyways and shadows. At first, he dismissed it as a trick of the light or his overactive imagination. But then, he saw her again, a woman with golden hair, stumbling through the streets, her movements erratic and desperate. She stopped briefly under a street lamp, her face illuminated for a fleeting moment. It was Sophia, or at least, someone who looked exactly like her. His breath hitched, and he stumbled backward, knocking over a glass vase on the coffee table. The crash shattered not only the vase but also any remaining fragments of denial within him. That night, the nightmares returned with renewed intensity. This time, Sophia's voice wasn't just a whisper, it was a scream, piercing through the darkness and shattering what little calm remained in his soul. Days turned into weeks, and the situation worsened. News spread across campus of a madwoman roaming the streets, screaming a single name: Kelvin. Some claimed she was homeless, others whispered tales of curses and supernatural forces. Regardless of the truth, the story sent shivers down his spine. Was it really Sophia? Or was his guilt manifesting in ways beyond his control? One particularly restless night, he wandered into the kitchen, searching for solace in food. As he opened the refrigerator, the fluorescent light revealed rows of gourmet meals, imported cheeses, and bottles of expensive wine. Yet, none of it appealed to him. Hunger pangs twisted his stomach, not physical hunger, but emotional starvation. He missed the simplicity of sharing a meal with Sophia, laughing over cheap takeout while sprawled on his old dorm bed. Closing the fridge door, he leaned against the counter, head bowed. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes, though he quickly wiped them away. Weakness had no place here, not in this world of wealth and prestige. But deep down, he knew the truth: he was crumbling under the weight of his choices. The curse wasn't just external, it was internal, eating away at his very being. Each new luxury purchase, each extravagant gesture, only served to highlight the emptiness within. And Sophia's suffering, whether real or imagined, was a constant reminder of the price he'd paid for it all. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Kelvin stared out the window once more. Below, the city buzzed with life, oblivious to the torment raging inside his heart. For the first time since making the pact, he allowed himself to consider the possibility of redemption. Could he undo what he had done? Or was the damage irreparable, the stain of his actions too deep to ever wash away? For now, those questions remained unanswered, lingering like the shadow of a storm cloud on the horizon. The small, dimly lit chapel buzzed with an air of tension as the renowned Catholic priest, Father Gregory, prepared for the exorcism. Candles flickered along the walls, their soft light barely penetrating the heavy shadows that clung to every corner. Sophia sat in a chair at the center of the room, her eyes glazed and unfocused, muttering Kelvin's name over and over again in a haunting whisper. Kelvin stood nearby, his heart pounding like a drum against his ribs. He watched Sophia, torn between guilt and fear. Her once vibrant spirit now seemed trapped within a shell of torment, and the weight of what he had done pressed down on him like an invisible force. Father Gregory began the ritual, his voice deep and resonant as he recited ancient prayers in Latin. The words echoed through the chapel, filling the space with a solemnity that made the hairs on Kelvin's arms stand on end. Around them, the other members of the congregation, Sophia's family, and a few church volunteers, chanted softly, their voices blending into a mourn for him. As the ceremony progressed, the atmosphere grew heavier. A cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing several candles despite the closed windows. Shadows danced erratically across the walls, twisting and writhing as if alive. Sophia let out a sharp cry, her body convulsing violently in the chair. Her voice rose to a scream, echoing through the chapel before dissolving into guttural growls. Kelvin staggered backward, clutching the edge of a pew for support. His mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Part of him wanted to run, to escape the scene and deny his role in this nightmare. But another part, deeper and more honest, knew there was no running from the truth. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he stammered aloud, his voice trembling. No one responded, all eyes were fixed on Sophia, whose struggles intensified. Her head snapped back, her mouth opening wide as a low, guttural voice issued forth. A voice that wasn't hers. "Do not interfere," the entity snarled, its tone dripping with malice. "He gave me permission. His sin binds us both." Kelvin froze, his breath catching in his throat. The words hit him like a physical blow, forcing him to confront the full gravity of his actions. Tears streamed down his face as he dropped to his knees, hands clasped together in prayer. "No. I take responsibility," he whispered, his voice growing stronger with each word. "It's my fault. What she's suffering is because of me." Sophia screamed again, her body arching off the chair as if pulled by unseen strings. Father Gregory raised a crucifix high above his head, chanting louder now, his voice cutting through the chaos. The symbol of Christ glowed faintly, casting golden light that illuminated the room and banished the shadows. Kelvin's confession spilled forth in a torrent of emotion. "I betrayed her. I used her love for selfish gain. I don't deserve forgiveness, but please, help her. Let her be free." His words rang out, raw and unfiltered, as he broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. For the first time since the ritual, he allowed himself to feel the full extent of his guilt without trying to justify or suppress it. The entity inside Sophia resisted fiercely, its voice rising to a deafening roar. But slowly, under the combined power of the priest's prayers and Kelvin's heartfelt repentance, the darkness began to weaken. Sophia's body relaxed, her screams fading into quiet sobs. The air around them warmed, the oppressive chill lifting as the last remnants of the curse dissolved. Finally, silence fell over the chapel. Sophia slumped forward, unconscious but peaceful. Kelvin crawled toward her, cradling her limp form in his arms. Tears streamed down his face as he rocked her gently, murmuring apologies over and over again. Father Gregory placed a hand on Kelvin's shoulder. "Repentance is the first step, my son. Now you must live with the consequences and strive to make amends." Kelvin nodded, his resolve hardening. Whatever lay ahead, he vowed to do whatever it took to rebuild what he had destroyed, not just for Sophia, but for himself. Years passed, and the world moved on. Sophia rebuilt her life, though the scars of betrayal remained etched deep within her heart. She found solace in helping others, dedicating herself to a career in social work where she could offer support to those ensnared by forces beyond their control. Yet, no matter how much time elapsed, there were moments when the memories of Kelvin resurfaced, whispers in the wind, fleeting shadows in crowded streets, or the faint echo of his name spoken softly in dreams. One rainy afternoon, years after the exorcism, Sophia found herself drawn back to the university town they had once shared. It was as if an unseen hand guided her steps toward the dilapidated building that had once been Kelvin's home. Now abandoned and crumbling, it stood like a ghost among the newer, gleaming structures surrounding it. The windows were shattered, vines crept up the walls, and the air carried the scent of decay. Curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, compelled her to step inside. The interior was dark and musty, with broken furniture scattered across the floor. Dust hung thick in the air, catching the dim light filtering through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. As she moved cautiously through the space, fragments of their past seemed to rise from the ruins. On the desk where Kelvin used to study, now covered in grime, she discovered a faded photograph. It was one of them together, taken during happier times, a day at the park, laughing without a care in the world. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up, brushing away the dust to reveal their smiling faces. For a moment, the image transported her back to that day, before everything fell apart. She placed the photo carefully back on the desk and continued exploring. In the corner of the room, half buried under debris, she found a small notebook. Its cover was worn, but the pages inside were filled with Kelvin's handwriting, notes, sketches, and fragments of poetry. One page caught her eye. "A love is not a sacrifice to be made lightly. It demands more than wealth or power can ever give." The words struck her like a physical blow. They were written months before the ritual, evidence of the internal struggle Kelvin had fought even then. A single tear slid down her cheek as she realized how deeply he must have agonized over his decision, and how far he ultimately strayed from his own convictions. As she turned to leave, a gust of wind swept through the open doorway, carrying with it the faintest whisper, "Sophia." Her breath caught, and she froze, turning slowly to scan the empty room. There was no one there, only the echoes of the past lingering in the silence. But for a moment, she felt him, felt the weight of his absence pressing against her chest, a reminder of the love that had been lost and the price they both paid. Outside, the rain fell harder, washing away the dirt and grime from the old building's facade. Sophia lingered for a few more moments, gazing at the house one last time before stepping out into the storm. As she walked away, the structure behind her seemed to fade further into obscurity, swallowed by time and memory. But somewhere, deep within her, the ache remained, a constant reminder of the fragility of trust and the enduring cost of betrayal. And in the distance, amid the ruins of what once was, the faint sound of his voice lingered, haunting her still.